From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Well, here we are again, folks. Tuesday morning, October 19th, 2021. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to the CyberHub podcast. It's great to be back. I'm finally in routine, right? Just last week, crazy, a new baby in the house. And so things are starting to get into rhythm. So rhythm's back. All right, a few things. One, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please make sure to do so right now. You can find the CyberHub podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. Obviously, I've been away, so I haven't not dropped all my new CISO Talk episodes. I'll be dropping those this week. So go check out the CISO Talk podcast. Ton of great shows there, by the way, like over 127 episodes of CISO conversations, stuff that you can really get your hands around. So go and check that out as well. We are still in National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, right? So a lot of things going around security awareness and all of that. I'm going to talk a little bit different about awareness tomorrow in my special segment around National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. But without further ado, let's get into today's show. First of all, let's give out some shout outs. Good morning to Matt Lee. Thank you, my brother. Thank you so much to Dan. And thanks for being here. David B., good morning to you as well. It's great to be here, guys. It's just phenomenal. I'm excited, right? My son's given me a new outlook on life, right? I guess that's what offspring does. Marcia, good morning to you as well. All right. Shout out to KnowBe4 as well for their support of the show. And again, I'm forever indebted to Mr. James McQuiggan. Forever indebted to Mr. James McQuiggan for filling in for me last week. Last minute, kind of him and I spoken, and it was always last minute, and he was living on the edge, but he did such a magnificent job, and I'm always grateful for him as well. Folks, what are you drinking this morning? Because, as a new father, I need a lot of coffee. I'm on my fourth espresso, and it's only 9:05 a.m. Eastern. So with that being said, coffee cup cheers. But before we do that, Mazel Tov, Matt Lee, whose son turned 18 today, meaning they get more expensive at 18 than they did the first 18 years of their life based on current inflation growth. So keep that in mind, folks. My double espresso, whatever you're drinking. Matt, I know he probably is drinking a Red Bull, but, whatever you guys are having this morning, coffee cup cheers. Then eventually start sleeping through the night about the time they turn 25. Yeah, eventually. And Finley, good morning. Thank you for being here. Folks, let's get into what's happening in the world of cybersecurity. A lot of great stories happening today. A lot of it around ransomware and state-sponsored attacks. We're going to get into those here. Let's start off with our first story where FBI, CISA, NSA all talk about defense tips for the BlackMatter ransomware attacks, which have been a headache for so many organizations. One, because BlackMatter's want a ransomware as a service. Kicked off in June. They're going after corporate networks. They're looking at US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. They've made at least $100 million. They're looking to buy access to networks for as much as $100,000, meaning they're going to employees in companies and offering them $100,000 to get them to get access. So we talk about endpoint control and permissions and roles and identities and password lists and MFA, but we also know that greed is the mother of all things. And one disgruntled employee who just gets a hint of this could do this. And I found a really interesting thing on Reddit last night, right? Baby couldn't sleep, so I was holding baby and I was on Reddit and I'm looking through, and there were some threads on there of people going like, I hate working here, and people actually pinging them and DMing them and chatting with them to try to gain access. So stuff that we need to be aware of. And how much should how much should we as practitioners be aware of is a whole other concept when I learned how to speak. I've been speaking baby for 6 days now. So BlackMatter is responsible for encrypting encrypting systems at multiple organizations in the U.S. They've been asking for ransom as high as $15 million. They're using a Microsoft remote procedural call function that allows them to list all accessible networks for each host. There's been a whole bunch of TTPs on this. One, the intrusion detection system rule, the inline intrusion prevention system are all in here. This is all in the warning for the FBI. You can see everything in the show notes. If you're not watching us live and listening after the fact, or listening just on your favorite podcast listening platform. One of the other mitigations is limit access to resources over the network to necessary service and user accounts. Again, permissions, roles, identity, and that's easier said than done a lot of times, especially when you're trying to be operational in a remote distributed workforce that doesn't operate anymore in the 8 or 9 to 5 traditional hours. A lot of us know that some people plug in their laptops and work from 9 p.m. to midnight. And if they run into any issues, that creates a whole another set of challenges. So, folks, please keep that in mind as we go along. Jane, good morning. No, you should not. I'm not trying to make you never sleep again. I want you to be informed and understand how to deal with stuff. But thank you for that. We do need new standards when it comes to how we deal with insider threats. This story to me was very, very fascinating. So a state actor apparently, or a cybercrime gang, breached the Argentinian government's IT network, and they stole the entire ID card details for the country's population. Among them is one of my favorite superstars in the world, Lionel Messi, who is probably the best soccer player on the planet. The agency is a crucial cog inside the Argentinian Interior Ministry, with its tasked with issuing ID cards to all citizens. Data that is also stored in digital format as a database accessible to other government agencies. It's essentially the backbone of identities in Argentina. The country's president, Alberto Fernandez, multiple journalists, political figures, and again, a lot of celebrities are all part of the breach, with their data being posted on the dark web. This is significant for a few reasons. One, this is a government agency. This is a lot of data. If I'm an Argentinian citizen right now, I'm very, very uneasy. The government has yet to offer any significant changes, and one, how they explain it, and number two, what they're going to do about it. And think of that. This is significant. This is going to have long-term implications. And we live in a global marketplace. So how many global organizations that are not Argentinian-based but want to do business with Argentinians may not be aware of this, where now this identity that's been stolen can now be used to open and maybe defraud other nations using someone else's identity with all the verifiable information that you would cross-check against the backbone of that system. This is extremely significant. We'll get to a few more comments. Hello from Hesse, Germany. I love Germany, man. Thank you for your energy and time that you share with us, especially now when your baby needs you. Well, my baby also needs a safe online world, and only us as a community can accomplish that. But thank you so much for your comment. Matt says, what happens to an economy when every single record is attackable? Every human can be spoofed. I imagine not great. Citizens can claim fraud intermixed with actual fraud. Not great. Indeed. And then most police departments don't know how to investigate online frauds. The training for police officers to do this does not exist. We'll move to a story that's near and dear to my heart. China has been after 10 Israeli hospitals over the last several weeks. Speaking to some friends at the National Security Directorate in Israel over the last few days, they've been seeing a huge spike in ransomware attacks. This has obviously been reported, but one of the bigger ones is one of the largest medical facilities north of Tel Aviv in the area of Netanya and Hedera, Hillel Yafeh Medical Center, which was under a ransomware attack. Israel is one of the only countries to actually have a ransomware 911 hotline, meaning if you're going through a ransomware attack, you pick up this phone and you actually reach the Israeli CERT in Beersheba, and they deploy an incident response team to help you deal with the situation. It's available to every citizen, no different than how it's available for us here in the States when we call 911 for any sort of assistance. Those efforts obviously were not enough to secure the endpoints. Some healthcare organizations were breached over the weekend. So I've done some research. You guys can read the story. Let me give you a few things. One, China is specifically going after Israeli hospitals because they're trying to identify the effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine and get data from these hospitals around COVID. China's COVID situation from internal people that we have within China has indicated that China still doesn't have a wrap around COVID. So something very, very, very significant. Take a look at this, because China has done this in the US as well, just as has not been celebrated or covered as much here in the States as it has been in Israel. This is headline news in Israel. It's on every single Israeli news broadcast. It's significant. Israel is also reconsidering some of its technological dependencies on China, including the building of some Israeli technology within China due to some of these attacks. So this has significant geopolitical implications, and Israel is bound to make some changes on this, folks. So keep your eye out on it. They've also, by the way, Israel's also about a month ago, if you guys remember on the show, I talked about how China was emulating Iran in attacks on Israeli organizations. And now Israel's gotten a leg up and has publicly attributed this to China. So the government hasn't said, we think it's from China. They've come out and actually added that the attribution is from China, and there are going to be some political ramifications for this, folks. So keep an eye out for that. Move to another story where the flawed grace is spreading through mass email campaigns. Security researchers over at Proofpoint are talking about a new malware campaign tied to TA505, which is Russian in nature and predominantly financially motivated. These guys go after banks, and they were behind the Drydax banking Trojan. The attacks are starting as low volume. Now they've steadily increased. They're trying to get people to open malware-laced attachments and phishing messages, either from COVID-19 insurance claims or a notification about Microsoft OneDrive shared files. Once you get there, they're looking for credentials. Once they get those credentials, they get access for this. All the TTPs are available on the Proofpoint site. You can definitely see those there and implement them as well. We're going to get to your comments here in just a moment, folks. I want to wrap up with this one. State-backed terrorists are breaching telcos with custom malware, and I'm going to call them terrorists because it's exactly what it is. The number one cyber terrorism state sponsor is China. This is also attributed to China, although not necessarily, but who else would go after telcos and IT firms in South Asia? Who else has an interest in doing so is no other than China. A lot of the TTPs on this one also are heading towards China. Symantec says that they've seen this to be very sophisticated with some really good tricks and some really effective ways to get into these systems. Afghanistan was one of them. We're obviously going to see the beyond Afghanistan. China's really trying to get a foothold in Afghanistan. They're also trying to get their hands on a lot more, folks. So keep that in mind. Let's get to some of your comments here and questions. Jane is asking, yes to incident responses. Can we model this elsewhere? Yes, I know that Arizona is the governor of Arizona. We talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago or last week. I can't remember any more times, just a thing where it's crazy. But I know that Arizona is setting up one for government, but not for private citizens. I think this should be a state effort backed by the FBI. Like, it would be cool if the local, like in Georgia, the GBI did this, or in Florida, the Florida Bureau of Investigations did this, or whoever else. That would be really, really effective. It should be modeled elsewhere. Is Israel's defense posture better for their healthcare system. Israel has a very complex and there's a lot of private-public partnership within Israel within cybersecurity, Matt. So they don't have some of the hesitations and restrictions that we as Americans have towards government, simply because everyone there does military. You typically have a second or third degrees of separation from people who work within government. So you either know the person directly, you've served with them in the military, you went to a university, a school, or whatever, or you know them through a cousin, an uncle, an aunt, a friend, or so forth. So there's a lot more trust, and there's a lot of stuff that they do around this that's absolutely significant. Matt says that is the difference in Israel. Its news is not focused on distracting crap, and the general population is aware of the cyber threat. We are not. Yes, cyber is very big in Israel. They constantly talk about this. My buddy Idon Or is constantly there on local TV, so we see that stuff all the time. Good morning to Mr. McQuiggan, who got a shout out earlier today from awesome Rockford, Illinois. Thank you for being here, sir. Jane says the point here is that with Israel is that its citizens participate for the most part because of the nature of the participatory entity, but that's the problem with these attackers are hardcore, like hospitals. Yes, indeed. It is absolute terrorism. It should be approached as that, and this is going to be extremely significant. Dan says lots of actors interested in power plays or destabilizing Southeast Asia. We'll have to see if we ever get solid attributions. Likely we won't. We know we're getting solid attributions. The question is no one wants to call it for what it is, right? Politics stop it from being there. So that is absolutely true. Folks, that's it for the Practitioner Brief here today. I'll be back again tomorrow with a lot more. Stay tuned. Until then, please subscribe, share, comment below. Thank you so much for all your great comments today and being part of the show. Dan, Matt, Jane, everyone, James McQuiggan, and everyone else. Who am I forgetting here? I got to give everyone a shout out. Let's see. Findlay as well. Marcia, David. Thank you all for being here today. Everyone watching us on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, check it out. And the show will be replayed in just half an hour on Twitch and Twitter and everywhere else. Until then, have a great rest of your day, folks. And most importantly, on a day like today, stay cyber safe. Cheers.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.